Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome. My name is Buzz Thomas. I'm the interim superintendent of schools here in Knox County, and we want to thank you for coming out tonight. We're in the process of building the best school system in the South right here in Knoxville, and we can't do that unless we manage growth effectively, and that's what we want to talk about tonight. We're building a new middle school at Hardin Valley, and we want to make sure that we zone that school in a wise fashion. So we're really focusing on that particular challenge tonight, but if you came here to talk about any of the zoning about middle schools, we'll be happy to hear from you. Before I turn the program over to Russ Oakes, who is our operations chief and has a brief presentation to make, I want to introduce some elected officials who are here. We have a couple of our school board members here, Susan Horn and Terry Hill. Susan, Terry, where's Susan? Somewhere around here. And Terry's here, and we appreciate them being here tonight for our school board. Former County Commissioner Larry Smith. Commissioner, it's good to see you. Susan, I just introduced you. Glad you're here. She just walked in the door over there. And we have several of our principals here. Wes Edmonds from Farragut Middle School, who's raising his hand back there. Sherry Smith from Carnes Middle School. And David Claxton from West Valley. And Ryan Seavey from Farragut High School. Ryan, congratulations on your football team. You guys are going to have a big Friday night coming. I can just feel it. Yeah, so congratulations on that. Oh, wonderful. Okay. Thank you very much for being here tonight. Yes, thank you very much, Alderman. Okay, so Russ Oakes is our operations chief, and Russ is going to do a brief presentation on the process we'll be going through, and then we'll give you an opportunity to give us your comments or ask any questions you might have. Let me ask that you do a couple of things before you speak. We had a pretty divisive election this year at the national level, and at times like that, it's important to remind ourselves that we have an important role to play in our school system to teach good citizenship and civility. And we want to make sure that tonight we model that also. So I'm going to ask whatever your feelings are. We're glad to hear them, but I would appreciate you expressing them to Mr. Oakes respectfully, and that we'll just have a good conversation, and we'll listen very, very hard to what you say. I'm also going to ask you, because of the size of the group, that when you speak, like I've tried to do, limit yourself to 2 minutes, okay? Just do the best you can to get said what you need to say, and then let us hear from somebody else, because we've got a lot of people that want to speak tonight, and we'd like to get you out here at a reasonable hour. Okay, thank you very much. Russ Oakes.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Can you turn me on? Okay. Can everybody hear me? Okay. Like Mr. Thomas said, we're in the process of building two brand new middle schools, one in Hardin Valley, one in Gibbs. Both of those schools are planned to be open in August of 2018. And the Gibbs school will have a capacity of about 600, and the Hardin Valley school will have a capacity of about 1,200. And they're really designed, the Hardin Valley school designed to accommodate recent, and if you can give me the next slide, Abby, the recent population growth that we're experiencing, and future population growth in the western part of the county and some of our schools in the west. The Gibbs Middle School is really designed to provide a community school closer to the proximity to the center of the Gibbs community. Before we can address any of that and go through that process, we have to develop some school zones for these schools and provide something for the Board of Education to consider and for the board to vote on. This is really the beginning of that process tonight, and what I want to do is to set a little context for you on what our process is and some of the things that we think about when we start looking at school zones and how to design school zones, particularly around the context of what we're talking about on the Hardin Valley School. And then I want to listen back and let you all tell us some of the concerns you have or some of the things that you think that we need to take into consideration that we may not be taking into consideration or that you may think we have overlooked, so that we can capture that. And as we design these zones, we can design them so that we're coming as close as we can to meeting everybody's concerns. I don't labor under the understanding that we're going to make everybody happy and address every concern the way everybody wants to do it, but we want to come as close as we can. So Abby, if you'll give me the next slide. This is just sort of a rendering of what the new Hardin Valley School is supposed to look like. It's being built on the campus that's shared by Hardin Valley Academy and Hardin Valley Elementary School. It's going to have 64 classrooms and about 170,000 square feet. So it's going to be a fairly large facility. Abby? In zone planning and development, we've got a number of things that we look at and a number of places where we pull information. And the first thing we do is we get population forecasts from the Metropolitan Planning Commission. And we get those annually. They provide those to us. And then we will take that and we'll do enrollment projections based on what our current enrollment is and what the population projections are that we're getting from the Metropolitan Planning Commission. And that will help us as we start building zones. And some of the other things that we consider when we're looking at school zones are the school's capacity. We don't want to build a zone that would bring the school to its capacity the day the doors open. We want to try to give it some room to grow as we put it together. We also want to consider transportation and how we're going to manage the bus routes and how to get them in and out, and that we're not driving past one school to get to another school, and to eliminate as much of that as we can. I know there's some issues that we have with that in other places around the county right now, and one of the things that drives us into those kind of situations is the fourth bullet that you see up there, geographic and man-made obstacles. And here in Knox County, we have the great misfortune of having a number of ridge lines that run from the southwest up through the northeast part of the county. And we also have the privilege of having two rivers that cut through the county. And those obstacles can only be traversed at certain points. You can't get through them every place. So those are things that we have to consider, and how we get through those in order to design a zone that tries to make some sort of sense around our transportation network. And for example, a man-made obstacle that a lot of you all are probably familiar with is we've got a railroad line that runs down between here and Chodo, where there is an underpass that we can't get a bus through. So you have to drive all the way around in order to come from Chodo up to the Farragut School. So it's not ideal. The other thing on there I sort of skipped over are parent responsibility zones. We have areas that I'm sure you're familiar with if you live in one of them around the county where we don't provide bus transportation. And that's if you live within a mile of an elementary school, we don't provide bus transportation. If you live within a mile and a half of a middle or a high school, we don't provide bus transportation. And when we develop the zones or the attendance zones for the schools, what we try to avoid is zoning one school's attendance zone into another school's parent responsibility zone. So that's sort of what we say the minimum zone for a school needs to be is its PRZ, and we have probably 2 or 3 of those around the county that don't have bus transportation because all their population comes from their PRZ. The last thing on there, and that's something that folks are very, very interested in, and we're not always able, we maybe have more trouble meeting that one than any of the congruent middle and high school boundaries. And what we want to try to do is keep kids attending in a group as they matriculate from elementary school to middle school to high school. Now, we've got a considerable number of middle schools that feed multiple high schools. And in cases like that, what we want to try to do is make sure that we're not taking a small number of kids out of a middle school, 10 or 15 or 20, and sending them off to a single high school. We want to keep the number as large as we can. But that's something that we're going to have to deal with as we go through this middle school zoning and try to avoid creating more of those types of situations if we can, and as we go through it and we look at it, to try to eliminate some that may currently exist. So, Abby, if you'll give me the next slide. Our timeline on this, right now we're starting the discussion to get your all's input, and we'll continue this through January. We currently have 4 meetings scheduled. We're in the process of scheduling 2 more in January to gather input from around the county. Between December and February, we'll start developing and pull together a tentative zone plan. And then our intent is to come back in the March-April timeframe to the community and say, okay, here's what we're thinking about. You all tell us what you think about this tentative plan. We'll take those comments, go back, we'll tweak the plan based on that, and then bring something for the Board of Education to consider probably in May. Excuse me. And if we can get through that whole process, what that'll allow us to do is have zones in place for both of the new middle schools a year or more than a year in advance of their opening. So it gives time for folks to think about what they're going to do and how they're going to address it, their kids, and how they want to manage the impact to them. Next one, Abby. Like I said earlier, that we're trying to address enrollment challenges for a number of schools when we do the zoning for the new Hardin Valley Middle School. And you can see I've sort of listed those up here in the 3rd bullet with Farragut, West Valley, Bearden, Carnes, and Cedar Bluff Middle Schools is what we're looking at as potentially being affected as we design this zone. And if you can give me the next slide, Abby. This is what the zones currently look like in the west part of the county. This right here where we've got the bar is where the new Hardin Valley Middle School is being built. And you can see that if you'll give me the next slide, I'll show you what we're talking about. These are the capacities of the 5 schools that I discussed, and this is the current enrollment. So you can see by looking at those numbers that we have some challenges in several of those schools, and we'd like to take this opportunity to try to address those. Are we going to be able to do that? I don't know. Here's our targets. Here's the area that we would like to get to in enrollment at all of those schools, to include the new Hardin Valley Middle School at about 1,000 students. Can we do this? I don't know. When we get your all's comments and we sit down and we start looking at what's possible on the map, what our geographic constraints are, what our transportation constraints are, then we'll know how close we can get to this. So we'll start making some trade-offs and having those discussions here in the next couple of months. Abby? Go back to my map, if you would. Go back to the first bullet on that slide. Talked about what the zone of the new Hardin Valley Middle School might be. I can tell you it would probably be logical at this point to assume that the zone, at a minimum, would include that area that would be west of Pellissippi Parkway and north of I-40 75 right there. Is that exactly what it's going to be? I don't know. Maybe a little smaller than that, maybe a little larger than that as we get down and we start, looking at the specifics and trying to figure out how we can address the enrollment at these other schools in the southwest part of the county as well. Okay. one more. No, you're going backwards on me. There we go. You know, so, and then that last bullet sort of talks about how potentially the zone lines would shift to the south and the east as we design zones to try to address those enrollment challenges that we have. Next. A few other considerations. Timing. The schools are going to open in August of 2018. We've got to be ready to go in August of 2018. The structure, should we open the schools with all 3 grades, or should we grow into the school? Should we bring it in 1 grade or open it with 2 grades and then grow it into 3 grades? Those are things that I'd like to get your all's input on. The assignment, for example, should we grandfather certain students to allow them to remain in their current middle school if they've been rezoned? I've been here a few years and been through a few rezonings, and I don't remember a time that we haven't had some sort of grandfather provision in place. And that's one of the other things I'd like to hear from you all tonight. If you think we need to have some sort of grandfather provision, and if that's the case, what does it need to be? What do you think it ought to look like? And really, as we talk about this, we're talking about this really tonight within the context of the Hardin Valley Middle School. But I think when we talk about grandfathering, we need to apply that across the county so that we wind up having the same grandfathering plan that we do in the east end of the county that we do in the west end of the county, so that we're consistent on that. And then the community. This last bullet is one of the most important. Is how do we and what are the most important steps in building a cohesive and constructive school community to support the academic success of the students that are in the new schools. And really, I think too, we need to consider how the school community at schools that may have a significant rezoning will change, and what do you need to do to rebuild that school community. Because if you look at the map that I just showed you a minute ago, a big chunk of the Carnes Middle School population is probably going to wind up being zoned to the new Hardin Valley Middle School. So that will change the population and the community of the Carnes School that remains, as well as for the new Hardin Valley Middle School. Next, Abby. And so at this point, we're going to stop. I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to let you talk, and we're going to make some notes and listen to what everybody has to say. And what I want to do is let you know that we've got an email address if you want to send us email. If you have a detailed proposal and you want to tell me where all these lines need to be drawn, I'd love to see it, and we'd love to consider it. And you can send it to rezoning@knoxschools.org. or any other comments that you've got you want to make sure that we get. And we're doing updates that we pull off of the email and information we get in, and we'll post those on our website at knoxschools.org. Okay? So with that, I'm going to shut up and turn the floor over to you all. And if you'll just raise your hand, we've got some mic wranglers here, and they'll bring you a mic. We're being streamed live tonight on our cable access channel, so that's out there as well. So, Councilwoman, or excuse me, Alderman.
Alderman, but I'm representing as a parent, not
Okay.
as the alderman. I don't have permission from the rest of the board to speak to this.
Okay.
But I will beg your pardon. I've dug into the numbers, and my statement's probably going to be about 4 minutes. I timed myself, so I appreciate if you. But I did dig into the numbers, so it's all facts, and it's presented in a nice way, because I know how it feels to get attacked while you're standing up there. So I'll just read from what I've written. I believe the best way to determine how to draw the zone to accommodate Hardin Valley Middle is to reflect on and assess the results of the 2007 zoning decision that accommodated Hardin Valley Academy. There are lessons to be learned, and I believe issues to be addressed. First, Farragut High School has the capacity of about 2,200 at its top end. A student enrollment of about approximately 2,000 allows for the school to balance and address both the needs of students who struggle with school and the needs of high-performing students. Currently, Farragut has 1,772 students. 109 of them are transfer students who live in the northwest sector of Farragut and are zoned for Hardin Valley Academy. The last time Farragut had a student enrollment of over 2,000 was in the 2008-09 school year, which was the first year that Hardin Valley Academy opened its doors. Since then, the student enrollment has dropped considerably. It dropped to as low as 1,669 students in the 2013-14 school year. Since then, the enrollment has increased. I assume that was due to transfers becoming easier to receive when requested. Please note that without the current number of transfers from the northwest sector of Farragut, Farragut High School's enrollment would be 1,663 students. As a reminder, we need to be around 2,000 to be an effective school. Meanwhile, according to the projected enrollment in Knox County Schools staffing allocation for this year, Hardin Valley Academy is projected to have 1,998 students. The target enrollment when it opened its doors in 2008 was 1,800 students, and its top-end capacity is 2,000 students. It has been at its minimum population of at least 1,800 students since 2010-11 school year, the third year it was open, and the second full year of operation. With these enrollment numbers, there is no room for growth that is expected in the Hardin Valley area. Essentially, Farragut High School has paid and continues to pay a hefty price regarding its enrollment numbers since shortly after Hardin Valley Academy's opening. In 2007, the Board of Education was so concerned with filling Hardin Valley Academy that they were, in my mind, a little overzealous in the drawing of new zones, thereby negatively impacting the quality of education Farragut High School offers to its students. Before you draw the zones to accommodate Hardin Valley Middle, I am requesting that you address the student enrollment disparities in the high schools. Relying on transfers to increase enrollment in a school is not an effective long-term strategy. You have a group of neighborhoods in northwest Farragut who have demonstrated through transfer requests that they wish to be zoned for Farragut High School. Grandfather in the families who wish to remain at Hardin Valley Academy and allow this section of Farragut to return to Farragut High School. You are moving closer to direct feed from middle school to high school in West Knox County. Direct feed should simplify your transportation network. Draw your zones to support community. Stop treating our children like widgets that can be easily regrouped. These are children who build social networks through their middle school years. Those social networks help them get through and deal with the pressures of high school. Our interim superintendent comes from the Great Schools Partnership, which works to implement community schools. Farragut schools are community schools. Hardin Valley schools will be community schools. Maybe not in the traditional sense of providing services, but certainly providing the hub around which the community can gather. I plead with you to be more circumspect this time around. Farragut Middle School is a high-performing school providing freshman-level high school course options to kids and a rich related arts experience. The concern is that related arts will have to be sacrificed to continue to offer the variety of courses our children expect. Also, there is a concern about how you will transfer teachers from Farragut Middle. Please be mindful of that process. Our kids should not be negatively impacted to accommodate Hardin Valley Middle. Finally, please leave room for growth in Hardin Valley schools. It is clear that Hardin Valley is expected to see incredible growth in the coming years. Draw the zones, both high school and middle school, to provide for that growth. Do not fill Hardin Valley Middle at Farragut Middle's expense. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman, could you do me a favor? When you have an opportunity, can you email me that, please? Thank you, ma'am. Who's next?
Hello. Mine is along with her concerns, and that is, it's a continuous thing. We live just north of the highway off of Snyder, and we're zoned for Farragut Primary, Farragut Intermediate, Farragut Middle, and Hardin Valley Academy. So we're one of those odd pockets, which would be, as she mentioned, Farragut High School is not as fully crowded yet, as stated, and we were thinking to keep the students together would make more sense than to further that. Your slide talked about keeping the middle and the high school together.
Abby, can you give me the map, please?
But if you went and did that in our section, then that would just mean, the two lower schools would be Farragut, and then the two highers would be Hardin Valley. That splits it even more. It seems more sensible to move them down and all be Farragut in our little pocket. I know we're not the big group, we're one of the little oddball sections.
That's one of those I was talking about earlier,
Yeah.
I think.
And with the map up there, no markers, I wasn't exactly sure.
You sure? I think I know. I think you're somewhere in this area right here, maybe?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
It's just north of the highway, and it may be
Yeah,
difficult
I
to
crossed the
access.
sign on the down the road where it says, hey, you're leaving Farragut.
Okay, okay.
I live in the same neighborhood as this fella, and I have an 8th grader who's going to go to Hardin Valley Academy, and I don't want them switched back to Farragut. You know, they're already leaving Friends. I don't want them to switch back, so I would like to know ahead of time so that I can make a decision. And if they're grandfathered in, you have to provide your own transportation. Is that correct?
If you're, no, if you're grandfathered, we have generally required you to provide your own transportation. So you said you have an 8th grader?
I have an 8th grader right now who will
Okay.
go to Hardin Valley Academy.
Okay.
Who's been in Farragut schools the whole time.
Okay, so you're looking at wanting to go to Farragut or wanting to go to Hardin Valley?
I just don't want her switched back and forth because I
Okay.
can't provide transportation. You know,
Okay.
if she's zoned Farragut her sophomore year. You
Well,
know.
we may, in this discussion, we don't have a proposal to do anything right now except address the middle school zones. What was discussed was that we need to go back and tweak the high school zones, and that's a conversation that we can have.
Yeah.
But it's not
Yeah,
part
but I
of the middle
represent
school
all
plan.
of our neighbors who go to Farragut primary, Farragut intermediate, and then you're going to zone us to Hardin Valley middle. You know, it's the same thing.
Okay, understand. Who's next?
Okay, so I was not really planning on talking. I've seen the effect of rezoning because my 2 kids went through it. And it almost brings tears to my eyes because they cried every single day this summer it happened. Every single day. So I know what happens. So keep that in mind and allow some grandfathering. I encourage you to at least let 8th graders stay and let their siblings stay because it's so hard for a parent to have kids in 2 different schools. So if they have a sibling in 8th grade, like if they have an 8th grader and they have a sibling in 7th or 6th, let them stay with them for the flow because that's easier on a parent, and let those kids stay.
Okay.
Sorry, that's emotional. Now, on the non-emotional part, I'm in that sector as well, like that kind of goes, we've moved, and that's why we're sitting at Farragut. We were in the rezone from Hardin Valley to Fall Camp, and that's what we went through. So my kids have already been rezoned once. So in the other section, right there off of Everett Road in that area, it's a very different, we were kind of confused by it because you go from Farragut primary, Farragut intermediate, and Farragut middle, and then to Hardin Valley Academy. I think you ought to seriously consider the high school because it would be nice to have a long row of the same school instead of pulling them out, having gone to all those Farragut schools and suddenly having to pull them out and go to a different high school. For my personal kids, they have friends at both, so I'm not really saying this for my personal kids because they'll have friends at either school because we've been through the rezoning. But I'm saying it just makes sense for a community. Like it just makes a lot of sense. And even for those kids playing sports as they move up, or for those kids in academic extracurricular activities as they move up, to stay in their same community just makes, especially when you go from middle school to high school. And so those are my 2 thoughts. Is just one is please, please, please allow grandfathering. And then 2 is, consider rezoning the high school. In my opinion, I wish we'd rezoned everything at once. Like, look at it all. Where do you need growth? Go ahead and finish it so that the same kids don't have to keep going through rezoning. Because at the rate we are now, I feel like if we don't rezone the high school now, when my kids get to high school, we're going to end up rezoning them again. And they've already been through it in elementary. And for them to have to go through it in middle and then have to go through it in high school is just not right.
Okay. Thank you. Got it.
Yeah, thank you. Okay.
Oh, go ahead. I've got you.
My name's Kevin Credo. I'm actually from the Hardin Valley Supports a Middle School group, and I appreciate you having this meeting. and encourage anyone, if they think of any other questions, take him up on that email address he gave out and give him over. Any questions that you've got, anything that comes up after this meeting. I agree with all the folks here, and I think this is a perfect time to look at all the school zones. Obviously, no zones can be perfect, but looking at the high school zones, the outliers are what seem to affect more people than anything. And if grandfathering isn't an option, I'd say it's a really good time to look at where the high schools are zoned, along with the elementary schools and the middle schools. I have an elementary school, Hardin Valley, that's going to go to Carnes and then Carnes. I know that can't be affected and be fixed for everyone every time, but like this woman up here mentioned, this is the perfect time if we're going to look at creating an option, creating a solution. That's the whole point of this thing, was to create a solution. Hardin Valley was built, the academy was built for 1800. It was overcrowded like that. We know there are at least 5 neighborhoods going up in Hardin Valley right now. So to someone's point about building for the future, it would be really nice to say, we know what the growth is, we know where the demands are going to be, we know what issues are coming up in the community. If you can do something to try to affect a long-term plan, that would be much better than trying to affect a short-term plan that needs tweaking 2, 3, 4 years down the road.
Okay.
I'm in that outlying area where we go to Farragut Primary, Intermediate, Middle, and we go to Hardin Valley High School, and we love Hardin Valley. We are blessed to be there. It was a tough transition, but with an open mind, we prevailed. I just want clarification, and it may be too early because I know y'all have kind of mentioned this, but when you rezone the middle school, is this going to parallel the high school? And if so, you also mentioned tweaking the high school zone. No?
Now, what we're looking at, and I probably wasn't really clear about that, it makes all sorts of sense to you if you sit and stare at a map all day. But if you don't, it doesn't make as much sense. But we've got certain areas around the county where over time, as zoning has occurred, we've got small pockets of students that will matriculate from one middle school to another high school. By small pockets, I mean 15, 20, 35 kids that may go from West Valley Middle School to XYZ High School, and then we've got 600 kids that go to ABC High School. So I think what we want to try to do and look at is to either eliminate those pockets, and there's 2 ways to eliminate those pockets, is you would reduce them down to nothing, or you would make them bigger so that you had a larger group of kids, so that you would travel with a peer group, so that you wouldn't be going into a new school without some sort of peer group. So that's what I was trying to get to on that. Now, is that doable? I don't know, but that's something that we want to consider and look at when we go through the process.
But no tweaking of the high school zone?
We have not talked about high school zoning at all at this point. We're talking about specifically the middle schools and trying to make those congruent or to line up with as much common sense as we can with the existing high school zones. Now, if we want to talk about tweaking the high school zones, I think that's a conversation we could certainly have, but that's up to the Board of Education and Mr. Thomas to tell us they want to do.
Yeah, I don't think we know that yet, but I've heard 3 people tonight say they would like us to do it, so perhaps we do need to do that. We just didn't come into this conversation with a proposal for high schools. We're thinking about middle schools, but we're open to whatever we need to do to make school work best for our families.
So would the middle school zone be similar to the high school zoning?
Similar is a good word, but whether or not you can get it, congruent, as Russ said earlier, is sometimes a real challenge.
Yeah, and it's never going to line up exactly, because we've got 13 zoned high schools in the county, and we're getting ready to have 16 zoned middle schools in the county, so it's never going to line up exactly.
Well, I'm ecstatic with Hardin Valley, and I hope to continue to go.
Appreciate it.
I'm a minority, but
Yeah, well, the good thing is, and it's one of the reasons we're dealing with
Anybody else? Yes, sir. Can we get a mic? Oh, thank you, Carl.
Thank you. My name is Carl Wheeler, and I live in the county here. I believe you mentioned earlier that you had in mind 2 more schools that you were going to have community meetings in.
We've got two more scheduled, and we're scheduling, in the process of scheduling 2 more.
So are you scheduling some new schools that are not currently on your list?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
And when we have those nailed down, we'll publish those as
We're
well.
in the process of trying to schedule one of these conversations at Vine Middle School
Okay.
and also at South Doyle Middle School.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
I hope this is an appropriate place to say this, but while we're dealing with zoning, I just have a few questions to ask. Why are our African-American children continue to be bused to schools from their communities when we have schools in our communities that are within walking distance? And I ask the question, what is truly behind zoning and building these new schools in predominantly white communities?
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Could you please pull up the map
Sure.
that you were showing before? And I'm going to touch on a number of subjects, so feel free to chime in. And first, I want to say I'm hearing Hardin Valley and I'm hearing Farragut. And what I really want to strongly get across is, because we were in the Farragut primary, Farragut intermediate, Farragut middle, and then switched from Farragut High School to Hardin Valley Academy. In our neighborhoods, for a few years, it almost seems like it was a choice. So we have experienced that transfer process and the decision, do you go to Hardin Valley or do you go to Farragut? And what does that mean to our family and the dynamics? And we went to both parent nights. We think both schools are fabulous. And I think that's a great problem to have, that we have 2 such fantastic schools. And I want both schools to succeed well, because when we both succeed well as all Knox County schools, we rise together and become stronger. And this is what it's about. It's for the benefit of our children's education. And so along those lines, where we are, I'm in the Fox Run, Saddle Ridge, Sedgefield, Orchid Grove corridor, which is that small yellow spot beneath the interstate. And now, like I said, both schools are great. There are a lot of families in my subdivision who would like to send their children to Farragut High School, but family dynamics or both parents work, they can't do that. So this is where we get into domino effects. And there's a lot affecting, if you ask all those parents in those 4 subdivisions if they'd like to be flipped back to Farragut High School, I can't speak for all of them, but I think a majority of them would say yes, and for a number of reasons. Now, those parents who have made the investment of going into Hardin Valley Academy, such as you, they need to be supported, because the school board, in my opinion, overreached, or whoever made that decision, for multiple of reasons. And change is inevitable. It will always happen. But what's happening is there's a lot of hiccups and concerns. First of all, I have a daughter who attended Farragut Middle School. She was in the advanced math and advanced biology program. When we approached high school and we went to both parent nights, we were told that she would not continue to chemistry in 9th grade as she would at Farragut High School, and at Hardin Valley she would be put in PWC, Physical World Concepts. So first of all, there's an academic hiccup there, which I know we're focusing on the middle school, but it's domino affecting into the high school. And so that was a major decision in where do we go. So if you pull us into Hardin Valley Middle School, one of my first questions to you is going to be, because I have twins at Farragut Intermediate, are you going to offer an advanced biology program at Hardin Valley Middle that is offered at Farragut Middle. And we were the only school for a while, and I understand West Valley is in its inaugural year of being a pilot program. So that is, first, a curriculum concern of mine, because I anticipate, I'm not guaranteed, that my two twins may follow in a similar path. So, getting back to the chemistry versus PWC idea, you know, I felt like we were zoned Hardin Valley, and you were putting my daughter at a disadvantage from allowing her to take chemistry at Hardin Valley versus most of the kids at Farragut Middle who take biology flow straight into Farragut High School, and they continue on with that chemistry. They have that momentum in the science, but your science sequencing is different. So there's an argument there where you need to visit the high school issue with this.
Let me clarify one thing real quick before you go forward. This is the middle school zone map.
Yes.
So this part below the highway right here is zoned to Carnes Middle School. When you look at the high school map, it doesn't line up like this. It makes a much deeper cut out in this area to go to Hardin Valley Academy. So
Well,
it's larger than that.
We're this little notch, and I know a lot of our neighbors look at me and said, oh, we don't need to go to that meeting, that's ridiculous. They will never zone us for Hardin Valley Middle. It's so far, and why would they send us to Hardin Valley Middle when Farragut Middle School is just down the street? And I said, well, look what they did with Hardin Valley Academy already. They're great schools, once again, but I said, you're already pulling us. And you know, there's a lot of reasons why parents in our corridor of our subdivisions don't want our high schoolers necessarily to go to Hardin Valley Academy. I mean, when you're in high school, you've also got new drivers. And think about the safety issues of new drivers traveling down Kingston Pike to Farragut High School versus all the way down those curvy roads in Hardin Valley Academy. And that's a legitimate concern. Also, in light of the bus accident in Chattanooga, I'm concerned about putting my children, if we were zoned Hardin Valley Middle School, I'm very concerned about putting my children on that bus to go to Hardin Valley Middle School.
Okay.
And then another reason why I personally don't want to be zoned Hardin Valley Middle School, even though I think it's going to be a great school, I think the Hardin Valley community schools from elementary to middle to academy are going to be fantastic. And they might even supersede the Farragut system at some point, or we'll be neck and neck together. I hope we are. I mean, there's a lot of development out that way. Another reason why I'm not in favor of it is logistics, because I do have children who are about 5 years apart, and they are very active in extracurricular activities. I'm a single parent. I cannot be in two places at once to pick up children. So that starts limiting the ability for my children to do after-school sports, orchestra, activities, because I can't be in two places at once. They're too far apart. And even though the middle school and the high school would let out about the same time. And then another reason why I'm not necessarily in favor of rezoning our area, which is technically zoned Hardin Valley Academy, to Hardin Valley Middle, is even though, once again, they're both fantastic schools, it has affected our house resale. A lot of realtors have told us in our corridor that houses stay on the market 3 times longer than comparable schools that are just across Kingston Pike who are zoned Farragut High School. And that's because it's not an objection that buyers don't want to go to Hardin Valley. There's 2 objections they have, and I've personally experienced it, and many neighbors in my subdivision and neighboring subdivisions are experiencing it. What the objection is they first do object Farragut Primary, Farragut Intermediate, Farragut Middle. They say, you're very near, you're entrenched in the Farragut school system. Why do they pull you to Hardin Valley? You are basically, tearing apart the system that has been set up, the community system. And then they say, if I truly want to send my children to Hardin Valley Academy, then I'll buy a home closer to that school. Why do I want to buy in the town of Farragut, but send them all the way that distance, triple the distance, quadruple the distance, to that school versus the Farragut school systems, which are just down the street?
Yeah, let me see if I can summarize what I'm hearing from you and what I've heard from folks on this side of the room. And Abby, my map, it keeps going away.
Yeah, when it drops, just pull it back up.
Okay. I think what I'm hearing is, and it's that area that's in the west part of the county, out, for lack of a better location, one that's easy to get to, is the Watt Road area out there. And it's, what you're telling me is, rezone it back to Farragut High School and don't zone the Hardin Valley Middle School into that area. It's really this area right in here that we're talking about. Okay? Okay, got it. Understand it. Yes, sir. Can we get a mic over here, please? Oh, I'm sorry. Are you next?
Let's
Okay.
let you had her hand up. We'll get you right.
Sorry, just real short. I just wanted to second what Louise said about to please consider the high school when you do your rezoning, and keep, Farragut residents at the Farragut Middle and the Farragut High School if you can. And then the second was to also what this lady said back here regarding grandfathering. Please have a grandfathering plan that keeps siblings together.
Okay, got it.
All right, fair enough.
Very good.
I should have.
I'll come right back there.
Identify yourselves. I'm sorry. People might want to know who you are.
I'm not going to do that. I paid for it. I can be here. So I'll be a face to the data point. I live in Saddle Ridge. Is that better?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. I live in Saddle Ridge. I just got here in June. And so that says I wasn't part of this rezoning mess. But I'm here tonight because I don't want to be. So I don't know what's going on with the high school. I get you guys got to balance stuff. What I haven't heard is, what is your criteria to add this high school thing to your agenda? You've said you'll look at it, but you have not made a commitment. I understand one meeting isn't going to do that, but how do we know whether that does or does not get on there? And just to give you a couple more data points on the thought processes of why I live where I live. I'm in Saddle Ridge. I can see on that map that I'm not in there for Middle. We may or may not be for Hardin Valley. I don't know, I get a bunch of different stories from the few neighbors I have met. And I just looked it up. I'm 5 miles from high school. I'm 9 miles from academy.
You're 5 miles from Farragut and 9 miles from Hardin Valley.
Yes, sir, that's correct. So part of my thought process here, I don't, this is the first time I've ever heard about rezoning school zones. It's always been per county for me or whatever. So y'all ain't interested in history. I'm just saying, first off, it's kind of weird, but okay.
We've got a lot of schools in just one county.
All right. But I bought here because we were going to be piped into Farragut. And my wife looked at the whole education rating thing, and I agree with this. Look, they both might be great. But this young lady also had a great point, because one of the things I've thought about is, yeah, Campbell Station is kind of curvy, and Everett isn't any better. So a question I would ask is, all right, if y'all do that, are you going to fix those roads? Are you going to widen them? Are you going to make, Union Road's already a mess. And it's, that isn't any of y'all's purview here. I understand it, but these are some of the questions that I would also ask is, if you're going to make a change or a decision about the high school, would you please at least inform us, yeah, we're going to consider that, or no, we won't. And then if y'all are going to do some of this, I think I'd go ahead and back up and say, I don't want to be part of Farragut, Hardin Valley. I'd rather just run the table on it. So.
Hi, Jimbo Crawford. I guess I'm coming from a different side of the highway. I'm on the other side of Pellissippi Parkway over in the Carnes side. I guess I'm giving a little bit different perspective here among all the Farragut people. The one thing I guess I have to add is being a part of the original high school rezoning. Me and I know several other people in this room were there too, and I feel bad for the Farragut people for going from 2,000 students to 1,700 students. Our school went from about 2,000 students to 1,200 students. Carnes High School was absolutely gutted, excuse me, during that time. Talking about losing related arts, we lost them. Talk about losing teachers, we lost a bunch of great ones. Dr. Davis knows, he was there, and it was a tough time. I mean, it really was. Losing students and teachers to the same school, you know, and it was really kind of debilitating, and it just kind of crushed the morale of the community there for a long time. It's just now kind of starting to build up where it should be. And I guess my thought process for the middle school is this. About 1,500 students or so at Carnes Middle. It's gigantic. And somebody else can agree with me in this room too. In my opinion, I think it's already understaffed, even where it's at. We're talking about taking 500 students away, you know, from Carnes Middle. But the size of the zone that I think those kids are going to come away from, you know, is like half of the Carnes Middle zone. So I guess my question is, it looks like we're going to be taking more than 500 people away from the Hardin Valley side. If we use 40 and Pellissippi as the line of demarcation right there, where are the other students that are going to make up Carnes Middle School? Where are they going to come from? And if we're able to do that, you know, what kind of staffing is on the line at Carnes Middle School in, you know, this particular thing? I mean, you know, there's obviously the enrollment's going to drop, but, you know, at the same time, like we were talking about with Farragut High School, you know, what programs, what things are going to be on the chopping block when that happens? At Carnes High School, it was things like theater, driver's ed. Those things went away, never came back. You know, what things is Carnes Middle School going to lose that's never going to come back because we're not pulling in the students to support those kind of things? I just don't want it to be a situation where, like what happened at Carnes High School, and the Farragut community was, you know, they rallied together and they were behind the rezoning thing, and very few neighborhoods in Farragut were touched, you know, by the Hardin Valley Academy when it was built. But Carnes, man, it was cut in half, you know, in the community, for whatever reason, they're the quiet bunch compared to what was going on over here on the Farragut side. And again, you know, being looks like the Carnes guy in the room, you know, among the Farragut people, you know, I'm here kind of saying, well, what's going to be left, you know, of our middle school and of our community school? Because what is the Carnes community anymore? You know, where does it go? What's our range? And so I just want to know that, you know, kind of looking at this map here, you know, north and east of Carnes Middle School isn't exactly shown, but I can't imagine the people coming from anywhere else. I mean,
Well,
I'll let you go. That's fine. I'm done. Thank you.
Okay, and I appreciate those comments, and I just want to go back real quick to what I said in the presentation when we were talking about if we're going to address the student populations, the enrollment at these schools, the zones would have to shift south and east. You know, so you were looking at, if Carnes loses population over here to Hardin Valley, it may have to pick up some population over here so that, you know, Cedar Bluff could pick up some population down here. You have to, you know, juggle the lines that way, and those are the kinds of things that we'll be considering, and the kinds of things I want to hear from you all about tonight.
I'm Tom Denton. I can't articulate anything any better than that's already been said by this young lady right here. I'm in the Fox Run subdivision. I have an 8th grader who is in the advanced math and science, and we share the same concerns. We've already put our transfer in, if you will, request for going to Farragut High School, along with the fact that I have a 4th grade daughter who I'm concerned is going to be possibly zoned for Hardin Valley. All my kids, they want to be in the community of Farragut because that's where we moved to for that particular reason. So again, she said it all. I just want to say that I feel the same way that she does.
Got it. Who's next?
My name is John Butler, and I certainly appreciate the comments I heard tonight. We in our community can definitely relate to them. One of the concerns that we have, and a question that I have is, will any of the kids who live in the East Knoxville, Mechanicsville, Lonsdale area, will they be bused to this school?
I can't see a scenario that would require that.
And the other question I have is that will you be looking at zoning for all of the middle schools?
We are, and that's what I was saying earlier. We've got a meeting next week at, I think it's Gibbs Elementary School, to talk about zoning for the Gibbs Middle School, and then we've got one, I think, after Christmas at Holston. Y'all correct me if I've got them backwards, but we're going to be at Gibbs and Holston, and then, like the superintendent said, we're currently trying to schedule some meetings at Vine Middle and South Doyle Middle as well. And those will largely be opportunities to discuss and look more closely at the zoning for the east part of the county.
Well, and I'd like to say tonight, I empathize with your concerns. We have those concerns in our neighborhoods, even more so because we really don't have neighborhood schools. A number of our kids live 2 blocks from a school and are bused miles away to another school. People who live blocks from them are bused miles away to another school. And so we have a problem in the Mechanicsville, Lonsdale area. Mechanicsville is right there at the end of Bearden Middle School zone.
Yeah.
And then you have the Lonsdale community there.
Yep.
And these kids, you have Beaumont, you have Western Heights. These school kids go to elementary school, and then they're bused the rest of their school life. And so we have a concern that zoning has to be looked at for the whole community. And we need neighborhood schools in those communities. We need neighborhood middle school and neighborhood high schools. Now this happens at the elementary school level. We got kids that live a block from Green School, and they're bused across the river to Dogwood. We got kids that live in the Burlington community, which is just a few blocks from Austin East, and they're bused out to Carter Middle School and high school. So our concern is the same as yours. Same. We want to have quality 21st century schools and excellent teachers. We want to go to school where we live. And so that's what we're asking for. When my wife stood up and made her comments, that's what we're talking about, is that we have been bused, and we've been bused, and we've been bused, and we're tired of being bused. Now, we're not asking for a new school right away. Because we know the financial feasibility of that. But we are saying that as far as zoning is concerned, we need to look at middle school, we need to look at elementary school, we need to look at high schools in our community, because we want the same thing that Farragut wants, and we want the same thing that Carnes wants and Hardin Valley wants. We don't want anything different. We're not asking for anything that you don't already expect.
Who's next? Yes, ma'am.
My name is Erin Bagwell. I have a child at Hardin Valley Elementary and a child at Carnes. And my main question really is, I know you mentioned this earlier, and I might have walked in late. I walked in a little bit late. But will there be someone from the Metropolitan Planning Committee who, will there be someone at these meetings to, talk with us about the growth? Because Hardin Valley is, it's insane how many houses are going up in that area. So is there going to be someone involved in that process?
Yeah, let me tell you how that works, and some of you have already heard this. We get annually the population projections from the Metropolitan Planning Commission. And then we take those and we go back and we look at our enrollment, and we develop enrollment projections for the schools based on the projections we got from the MPC about the population and what we know about our current enrollment, and go through. So go through that process. That's where the MPC plays in, and they provide us that information on an annual basis and forecast out for a number of years in the future. And I can tell you that, you know, when you're talking about, you know, what's the population going to be next year, we can get pretty close on that. But the further out you get, it becomes more art than science, and it gets challenging when you're projecting for kids that aren't born yet. You know, so it's difficult, but we do work with the MPC, and we'll sit down with them here later in December. We're not in December yet, but we get our annual projections from them in December, and that feeds into the process. Yes, ma'am. Who's next? Oh, let me get the lady in the back, and then we'll come up here, okay? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name's Valerie Neal, and I'm not a stranger to the rezoning either. My kids have been at Cedar Bluff, and when my oldest was in 7th grade, they rezoned us. We were at Cedar Bluff Middle. It was split between Farragut High School, Bearden High School, and then Carnes High School. And then Dr. Davis knows, my oldest was 8th grade. He went out to Carnes. And then I had 4 kids in 4 different school zones. My oldest stayed at Carnes, and like the gentleman said, it just really kind of split the school up. Then my son started as a sophomore at Hardin Valley, and then my one daughter was at Cedar Bluff Middle, and then my youngest was at Ball Camp. So you talk about pickup, that was 4 different school districts. So I'm hoping that our kids are in 8th grade at Cedar Bluff, and our wish is, I mean, I know you're talking about high school, Cedar Bluff has been split up many times, and our wish is that we haven't had a high school, and that our kids at Cedar Bluff Middle get to kind of stay, you know, go to Hardin Valley Academy because we've been split up. And what I'm hoping is we can have a sense of community also. Just 4 years ago, we were switched from our neighborhood from Ball Camp to Cedar Bluff Elementary. And now we might be looking at, I mean, our kids aren't going to be at the middle school anymore, but our neighborhood is looking at maybe going to Carnes when we just got rezoned to Cedar Bluff and then Cedar Bluff Middle. So my question is, some neighborhoods, if you've rezoned them recently, sorry, I'm nervous. I don't like public speaking. My concern is, you know, some of the neighborhoods that have been rezoned recently, don't look at those. I know that's hard to do, but we just went from Ball Camp to Cedar Bluff Elementary so that our kids could stay on that track to go to Cedar Bluff Middle and go to Hardin Valley Academy. And I'm just hoping that our neighborhood, we're in Hardin Valley, we're in, what's our neighborhood? I'm nervous. Atlee Fields, and we're off Middlebrook Pike. And I know kind of maybe the thought is that our side of Middlebrook Pike might go to Carnes, but then we just got rezoned, you know, to go to Cedar Bluff Elementary, and now we might get back to Carnes Middle when the process was to go from Cedar Bluff Middle to Hardin Valley Academy, because we don't have a community. Our neighborhood and our Cedar Bluff Middle has been split up so many times, and that's just not fair. You know, to go from one group of kids to go from Bearden, Farragut, I mean, there were 3 different high schools our middle school was split up to.
Okay.
So, I just would appreciate if you'll look at...
I'm here and leave this alone up here. Yeah.
I'm hoping.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, yes, please, because Dr. Davis remembers all that.
Okay. And can we do one more comment up here, and then we'll start wrapping up. I'll come to you, sir. Ma'am? This gentleman hasn't spoke yet. Let's take one more comment here, and we'll wrap up.
Thank you. My name is Ben Cade. I live in the Tanrero subdivision off Fox Road. I know there's been a lot of talk of kind of feeding up through the schools. I've got a child at Ale Lots, one at West Valley. We're actually zoned for Farragut, but we want to go to Bearden because of where we are, because there's only, Mr. Classic can tell me maybe how many kids from West Valley last year actually went to Farragut High. 15? We'll be one of those. I want my kids, I'm not concerned about the schools. I grew up in New Orleans. The school system here is unbelievable compared to where I grew up.
Thank you. Can you say that again?
No, it is. The high schools, all of them,
Yeah.
are great, and I think, I mean, they just really are. And I know that from experience growing up, like I said, in New Orleans. But so we want to stay West Valley. Like I said, we're just in that little yellow right there on Fox Road, just north of Sinking Creek.
Yeah, I'm not that familiar with the map, so I can't.
Well, if you look, go to your left.
Come
You're
on.
right there,
Over
right
here,
there.
right there.
That's where we are. So
Okay.
from the front of my neighborhood to the door at West Valley is 2.2 miles.
Yep.
Farragut Middle, I think, is like 5, and it's a straight shot Georgia.
Y'all want to stay there?
Right, we want to stay. So for middle school, we want to stay, and I would just encourage you too, if you
And
do
for
look
high
at the high
school,
school.
you want to go to Bearden?
Yes, because of that. And you talk about borders with rivers and things like that. Look at neighborhood borders, because we only have one way in and one way out. We've got 199 houses in our neighborhood, and the only way out is on Fox Road. So we've got to go all the way down across the railroad tracks, up Canton Hollow, if we ever were going to go to Farragut for anything. So just something to consider. So.
Go ahead.
All right, before Russ wraps up, I want to invite you to send us any additional comments you might have online. Email them to us at rezoning. It's easy to remember, rezoning@knoxschools.org. If any of you have questions, we'll be hanging around here tonight. We have 5 more of these conversations scheduled. So if you think of something you didn't get to say tonight, we look forward to getting to hear from you. I want to say one thing before Russ tells us goodbye, and that is you make me proud to be a Knoxvillian.
Can you give me the last slide, please?
Rezoning is an unnerving process for any parent or any student. And you have expressed some great concerns to us that we're going to try our very, very best to address. And I just appreciate very much the attitude and the civility, again, with which you express these very powerful feelings that you have. And I want to thank you. It's an honor to serve as your interim superintendent, and I feel great about the future in Knox County. Russ, anything else you'd like to tell us?
One other thing, sort of piggyback on the other meetings. We've got a meeting next week in Gibbs to talk about the rezoning for Gibbs Middle School. And then after Christmas, we're going to have 4 more, 2 that are currently scheduled, 2 that we're working